Welcome to this episode of Too Much Information, the women's health podcast where there's no such thing as oversharing. I'm your host, Issy Warburton, and every week I sit down with one woman who's lived it and one expert who knows it for a no-nonsense conversation about our minds, bodies, health, and the stuff we've been left to find out on our own. Before we get started, I have a big favour to ask you. I need you right now to take literally 1 millisecond to press follow or subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Have you done it? Thank you so much. For extra brownie points, you can leave a rating or even a review. And then check us out on Instagram. You can find us at 2.much.info.podcast. Make sure that you are following and then like, comment, share, tag as much as you possibly can. It makes the biggest difference and it also makes my day. Thank you so, so much. Enjoy the show. Today, we are talking about coming to the end of IVF treatment. Even though this episode's story and expert advice, that ultimately one's about being childless, not by choice, I think the advice from our guest today will be equally as relevant to anyone who's experienced unsuccessful fertility treatment or anyone who, like me, is in the middle of a fertility journey with all of its ups and downs that it brings. Just as a warning, we are going to be discussing infertility and also touching on miscarriage in this episode at points. Our guest today is Kelly De Silva, who, after going through her own 10-year journey of infertility, has spent the past decade supporting others through treatment and in life beyond it. Kelly, you used to be a geography teacher, didn't you?
I did, yes.
Yeah. How different is your job these days?
Very different, although I guess one of the ways that I've navigated life post-treatment is being outside in nature and mindfulness. So for me, being by the sea, being in the woods is just something that's really means a lot to me and I find really healing. So the geography still comes through in themes.
Oh, there's nothing like being outdoors, especially if you're feeling not 100%. And then our expert today is Angela Pericleous-Smith, a specialist fertility counsellor for over 20 years and chair of the British Infertility Counselling Association, otherwise known as BICA. Angela, what inspired you to become a fertility counsellor?
I was working as a counsellor, both in private practice, and I actually started off as a children's counsellor. And then I had my own fertility journey, and then a post did come up for fertility counselling, and I went for that post, which was only a very small part-time hour post at the time. But then over the years, I think I see how much, obviously I've experienced it firsthand. I've got family members who have experienced fertility issues firsthand, and I can see what a difference it does make. So over the years, I've become more and more specialised in fertility, so that all my work now is fertility counselling.
Can you tell us a bit more about the work that you do day to day?
Yeah, of course. So I've worked as a fertility counsellor for over 20 years now, showing my age, but I work in both private and NHS clinics, and my work is really kind of supporting people through all parts of their journey. So right from the very beginning, before sometimes they've even stepped through a fertility clinic's door, right until the end of people's treatment and journeys, right from that hope to the finality of treatment with or without a family. And then I'm also chair of the British Infertility Counselling Association, which is a professional body for fertility counsellors. So we really work there of trying to raise the standards of fertility counsellors here in the UK, so that people who are meeting with a BICA fertility counsellor should have the highest standards of care. And for me as well, part of that is really advocating with policymakers, charities, other stakeholders about ensuring that there is emotional support available, either in clinics or through clinics for people.
That's amazing.
At all stages.
And what an amazing thing to do and so needed by so many people. And Kelly, you've been quite entrepreneurial, haven't you?
So for the last 10 years, been working in fertility support, came to the end of our fertility journey 11 years ago, after almost 10 years of fertility treatment. For me, being a teacher was quite a struggle going through fertility treatment, even though my employees were really, really supportive. I think having to get up and kind of be on show and put on an act every day when you're going through such a difficult, traumatic thing was really, really difficult. Finishing treatment in my early 30s, I really couldn't find anybody that I could particularly relate to, or kind of role models who were my age. One of the things that really helped me was setting up the Dovecote Childless Support Organisation. It started off with me just thinking, if I can just get one person, and then I remember getting 100 in the community, and now it's over 1,000, and I've got a separate women's and men's group. So it's just enabled me to create that community and the friendships that other people have been able to have. And I know it's been a real turning point in other people's journeys as well, in terms of dealing with involuntary childlessness. So, and then through that work, went back to the clinic where I had treatment and worked with that clinic to roll out peer-to-peer support, walk and talk events, buddy system. And recently just started as the head of support at the Fertility Alliance, a new infertility charity in the UK, which is very exciting.
Brilliant. Well, we will put all of those links in our show notes. I would love to start with a bit of an icebreaker. Given today's topic may not be a laughing out loud one, I thought we'd just sort of tone it down a bit. I'd love you to both think back to yourselves age 15, 16, is there one piece of advice that you would give yourself?
In terms of, I guess, fertility, I remember going to the GP at 15 with really painful periods and just being told it's just your periods. The pains it's just your period flow. And it wasn't until about 4 years ago that I was diagnosed privately with endometriosis. So I spent all that time being described as unexplained infertility, which was so frustrating. So for me, I would say you have to advocate for yourself. You have to push. If you've got a feeling that something's not right, then just push for it. Yeah, so I would definitely say advocate for yourself. And if something doesn't feel right, then, go for more investigations if you can.
Yeah, I feel like that applies in all of life, but particularly in health for young women, doesn't it? Yeah, thank you, Kelly. And Angela?
Yeah, and I think at 15, 16 as well, definitely the message I used to get from, parents, relatives, whoever was, be careful, don't sleep with people, you might get pregnant, etc. And obviously not that I'm advocating for 15, 16-year-olds going out and having unprotected sex, but I think looking back, it would be more to educate myself at 15, 16 about almost like how to get pregnant in order to prevent it at that age. That makes sense.
No, it does. It absolutely makes sense. And I think it's also this wild fact that so many women, even when they're entering the time where they actually do want to have a baby, don't understand their menstrual cycle. I think, Angela, that's probably part of it, isn't it? A big part of it is understanding what your body's doing every month.
I mean, I was just told to go on the pill and then that will help the symptoms, which it did. And I guess the symptoms are masked because you're on the pill for so long. So when you come off the pill, you don't know what's normal for you. So I think, as well as advocating, knowing what a normal period is for you, with my nieces and nephews, so my nieces particularly, we talk about it a lot. So we have chats and I'm really passionate about them advocating and asking those difficult questions and things like that, and getting those investigations done.
And interestingly as well, just last week I was working with a male patient who was really kind of feeling guilty about the fact he didn't know about his partner's menstrual cycle, etc., and he wished he'd paid more attention. But actually, there's an awful lot of women that we're not taught about menstrual cycles and conception and such. So, yeah, it's good that you're teaching your nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
Kelly. Lucky them.
Bless them. I think they're used to it now. I've dragged them along to all sorts of events.
And definitely the nephews as well. I think that's equally as important.
Yeah.
Angela, this is your moment to shine as our expert today. We are obviously talking about coming to the end of fertility treatment and infertility in general. So, question 1 is, what do we mean by infertility?
So infertility is when there's been no pregnancy, no conception after 12 months of regular unprotected sex or treatment if it's same-sex couple or single person.
Thank you. What counts as regular sex?
2 to 3 times per week.
Okay. What is unexplained infertility?
Unexplained infertility is when all the tests have been done, so all the male tests, semen analysis, etc., all the female tests, fallopian tubes, blood tests, and no known cause has been found for the infertility, for the cause.
So everything looks normal, but it's not happening?
Yeah.
And how common is that in the UK?
A third of cases are unexplained infertility.
Okay. And what do we mean when we're talking about the end of treatment?
Okay. When somebody has come into their end of their fertility treatment or have finished their fertility treatment, either that might be that the clinic will no longer offer any treatment, or for some people, they've come to that decision themselves for a variety of different reasons, sometimes financially, sometimes emotionally, logically, etc. There's no right time to end fertility treatment. I think it's a very personal choice. If you've got a clinic that are saying to you they won't offer you any more treatment, or there's no more treatment that they recommend for you, it's very difficult, because then that feels like that choice has been made for you. And I always think that this can't be compared to anybody else. That very personal decision to end treatment, but that isn't an easy decision to reach.
Yeah, absolutely. When somebody comes to the end of their fertility treatment, Angela, what kind of support in an ideal world is available to them?
Okay. I mean, I always say having that support early on can make all the difference, because obviously, as I'm sure we might hear from Kelly, it's an incredibly isolating time and a very difficult decision to reach. So in an ideal world, there should be counselling available via your fertility clinic. And then there's alternatives like Kelly mentioned, the Dovecote, other kind of support groups or charities that offer support, or privately counselling. I do think it's really important that people try and seek that support, and quite early on, because that can make all the difference. Counselling should be offered at all stages, so before, during and after. I think, unfortunately, across the UK, there is quite a huge disparity between what clinics do offer, and the number of sessions is sometimes dependent as well. But by law, clinics do need to offer counselling before, during and after treatment.
Right. I actually had no idea.
How long constitutes after treatment? If it's 3 years down the line, can somebody access it? So there's all these kind of variables.
Final question. What does fertility counselling involve?
So for me, fertility counselling is really that place for individuals, couples that can have that safe space to kind of be able to come and use the session in the most beneficial way for them. So to have that outlet. I know I have already mentioned this, but I don't think any two people's journey is the same. So it's almost like it's not comparable. Even within couples, their journey won't be the same, their feelings and their coping strategies, etc. So fertility counselling is a space to share their story, their raw thoughts and feelings, and help them find ways of moving forward, which is individualised to them without the pressures of society or as an individual person, and really helping them to work through those deep emotions.
Yeah.
It is very individual. I'm actually going into my 5th part-time year of doing a PhD, looking at the experience of ending fertility treatment. And there are questions that come up quite frequently about, how do you deal with this, or how do you know when it's the end, or how do you deal with people or baby showers, and practical things as well. So that's really, and it's been really interesting to, as well as a lived experience, be able to research this.
I often get asked, but how do I know when it's enough? And I always think from experience of working with people that enough is enough when it's enough, which sounds a bizarre thing to say, but I think people just know. And
you just know. That's what I say, Angela.
And they
You
can't
just know.
possibly imagine that before.
We don't just wake up one day and think, I'm not going to have children, or, I'm going to end treatment. It's more of a gradual process with every unsuccessful cycle or miscarriage. We often have like a gut feeling like this isn't looking good, and there are those people that will be absolute warriors and will have cycles after cycle. For me, I couldn't do that emotionally. It was too much.
It's that whole balance of the life that could be and the child that could be. I think with friends going through it, it feels like this constant yearning for the life that they've imagined for themselves. And then I suppose something begins to gradually shift.
You feel like life's on hold. You feel like everybody else is moving on without you. Yeah. And that can be really difficult. When I started out, my friends hadn't started to getting married and having children, but as time went on, they did, and they got pregnant easily. And then I was the eldest of 4 siblings. They've all had children. I've got about 16 nieces and nephews. So as well as dealing with this personal experience, you've got all these external. It's something that's a lot bigger and impacts every aspect of our lives.
It's so true. And I know that they say that comparison is the thief of joy, but it's absolutely impossible not to, isn't it? Even just at a relatively early stage of a fertility journey, it's like a little dagger to the heart when somebody else is announcing their pregnancy and you are constantly comparing yourself. But what I hadn't expected and hadn't anticipated was this self-imposed comparison. I'm a planner and I like to picture events in advance. So I will have thought of friends' weddings or holidays. The holiday that we're on now, when we organised this 8 months ago, was absolutely convinced that I would be here pregnant. And I find myself disappointed by a life that I've imagined for myself because it's not happened yet. So I know that it's vastly inappropriate to be comparing an experience as someone who's not come to the end of fertility treatment. But I think there are probably comparisons to be seen between even the journey as well. Do you think that's fair, Kelly?
Yeah, I think so. Kind of like the life we imagined. My sister was pregnant at the same time as me, and then I lost ours. So every milestone, so she's going in to start her GCSEs in September. That's where ours would have been. I often don't feel childless. I feel very childful because of all my nieces and nephews. But it's not something that we ever get over. It's something that we learn to live with. There'll be other moments, like, for example, my sister's becoming grandparents. It's those milestones that you imagined for yourself, which won't happen. So yeah, it's tough, but we do learn to live with it and learn to live around that as well, to fill our lives in different ways.
Should we go back to the start of your story, Kelly?
Yeah, sure. So we got married 20 years ago, this coming Christmas. So 20 years ago, we were all excited with all the hopes and excitement of what was to come. We'd known each other from school, so kind of childhood sweethearts. So got married, and then shortly after, maybe the year after, started trying to conceive. And like I said, from a big Irish family, so didn't think there'd be any problems. Get married, you have kids. It's kind of this narrative that we're growing up with and told. And it was coming up to a year, and I just thought something's not quite right. It's not happening, and you do become like super researcher when you start trying to conceive. For a little while, you know, you'll be tracking everything. Well, I went to the GP. They were really supportive and did all the tests and came back with unexplained infertility. I just felt like I was on this, was like a protocol where you would do this. So the next thing was Clomid for 6 months, which was horrendous. I remember terrible night sweats, being really moody, hormones all over the place. And I did actually get pregnant on the last cycle. Unfortunately, that was when I had a miscarriage at 11 weeks. Yeah, I was due for my 12-week scan. It was rearranged for some reason. So I remember at that point, I was really struggling with anxiety. And then it was confirmed that I'd had a miscarriage, and the baby had stopped growing. So it was really tough. It was really hard. Because we do imagine once you get pregnant, you kind of plan, you know, what life's going to be like and all that sort of thing, you know, being pregnant at Christmas, or how you're going to announce it to everybody. But at the same time, but I think it almost gave me more hope. That's what you get told. Well, at least you know you can get pregnant now. After that, the NHS has said, well, you know, you got pregnant. So the next is 3 cycles of IUI. So we had the IUI with Clomid. None of the IUIs worked either. We knew that the next step was IVF, and we were entitled to 2 rounds of IVF. I remember coming home early from holiday to have the consultation and to get started with the IVF, thinking, well, that's the magic pill, really, because that's what we're told. And I remember the consultant, he was holding the prescription in front of me and said, this is your prescription, but you can't have it because the CCG has run out of money for this year. You've got to go on a further waiting list. And that just completely devastated me.
Yeah.
So that was really hard. And we decided at that point to pay privately. And it happened so quickly. So it was really frustrating that we had to go down that route. But I'm grateful that we were able to do that. We had the first cycle of IVF and it didn't work. And you go through all this, all the injections and the scans. And at this point, you know, every investigation that you could have had, you know, dive through your tubes and all of that stuff, that your dignity's just gone completely. And what starts as a journey to start a family becomes a medical process. I talk about loss a lot and grief, but there was a loss around that as well. The fact that we're having to go through this kind of medicated process to have a family.
You have this picture of it being very romantic and very personal and intimate between you and your partner. Suddenly you've got swathes of people involved and medical settings, and it slightly takes the romance away.
Absolutely. It feels so out of our control. You go from going, okay, I know that I'm ovulating around this time, so, you know, you can try naturally, to thinking, they have control of my body. They're actually controlling my body. And it was like this weird light bulb moment, thinking, this is so strange. But there was that hope and excitement that we were doing something different. And I think that was what, you know, it is that keeps you going. Then the second time, which was through fertility treatment, I was convinced I had every symptom. Me, that 2-week wait was probably the hardest.
During your 2-week waits, were there any go-to things that you did to cope?
The 2 weeks for me was always split in 2. So the first week was very much about, there's an embryo inside me, this is all very exciting. And then as that week went on, kind of hope started to go, but what about this twinge? The problem is with pregnancy symptoms and period symptoms, they're very similar. I would say do whatever feels right for you. So there'll be those people in the 2-week wait that want to go to work, that just want to get on with things. I was very much, the doctor will sign you off for 2 weeks. So I always put the 2 weeks for myself, because that was, you know, what I wanted to do. I've always been a real fan of like chunking it down. So, you know, giving yourself little, okay, by the time I get to Wednesday, I'm going to do this, and having other little milestones in the diary. And for the year as well, if you're on a fertility journey, just to break it down, because it can feel like such a long time. I just didn't do anything that I thought was going to be too much. So, you know, it would be a light walk. It was kind of just trying to eat the right things and eating healthily, not to go too mad with like box sets and things like that. I didn't want to do anything that I thought, well, I wish I'd not done that. So I took the 2 weeks for myself because that was, what I wanted to do. But yeah, that second week was always a little bit tricky. It is the longest 2 weeks ever. I had 2 embryos put back and I was like, is it going to be 1? Is it going to be 2? To find out there was none was just completely mind blowing. And then to be told by the consultant, well, these things happen, was just not what I needed to hear. And the fact that I had got pregnant gave me hope that it would happen again and it would work. To have it not work was just, I think that was probably the second biggest blow for me, because that isn't the message that we're often given. I was told, because I guess I was in my 20s, you're still young, and that was the message, you're still young, it'll happen, you've got a beautiful womb, all these like really unhelpful things that we're told by professionals sometimes.
Yes,
and it didn't work. At that point I decided, because you'd go into like super doctor Google mode, that there must be something. So I had some immune tests, which I completely pursued and asked them about having immune tests, because I have got some immune issues anyway. And they did find that I had natural killer cells. So the next protocol that I was on, I had some steroids and immune suppressants. And that was when I got pregnant. So again, it was like, I've done something different and it's worked. But unfortunately, it didn't progress. But because it had worked, it gave you that hope to keep going. And I think we talked about this earlier. Hope is a strange thing, really. I think it's a thing that keeps us going in all of this.
Totally.
And without that hope, we wouldn't carry on, because it just takes so much from us. Going back to what you said, Angela, I think for me, this lifelong loss is a loss that for most people outside don't see. We talk about disenfranchised grief. So it's a grief, but I know that when I lost Dad 2 years ago, it was a very, very different experience. People could see that I'd lost Dad, and I got lots of sort of people being very supportive. But it made me reflect on that journey of my childlessness, because people don't know what to say. We often get silence. I remember, and Mum won't mind me saying this, but saying like the last cycle when it hadn't worked, just an XX, just a kiss, because people don't know what to say. And I think that's why I've started talking more about this IVF gap, because when we get to the end of it and you're off a cliff, there is this space where it's just like, now what do we do? I think it's really understated that, we get, oh, you're so lucky, you can have mine. Why don't you just adopt? All these really, really useless comments that we get back from people. And one of the other things that I had a lot was, so you've given up then? And for me, I already felt like a massive failure. I think at that point I was like, I'm done with this now, because I'd just given so much. And we had a year's break. We just stepped away, and I remember just having a summer where we did really fun things. We went kayaking and horse riding, just like adventure things, because we'd just stopped doing anything that had given us joy. We'd stopped drinking, we'd stopped exercising, the sort of exercise that we liked doing. Everything was just focused on having a baby, and it becomes like this obsession.
I really resonate with what you say about not doing things that brought you joy, because that is just exhausting. But particularly with the rise of social media algorithms and things, and all of these TikTok doctors who are telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing, and if you do these 4 things you will get pregnant, it's really easy for life to become very scary and very dull very quickly, because you feel that everything that you could possibly be doing, that might be like going for a slightly longer run or having that glass of wine, you feel like these are all things that you're doing which are really bad. But I'm interested, let's take it to kind of the latter end of this journey. At what point were you having the break?
So so the last year we had the break, and it was what we needed. I wasn't sure whether or not we'd have the embryos, to find the 2 embryos back, but there was always this niggle that I just knew that if I didn't have them back, then I'd always wonder what if, even though I knew in my heart, I knew that they weren't going to work. My other cycles, I'd been really open and we told people. We didn't with this last one. In fact, I remember we'd booked a family holiday in Cornwall, and I was in my 2-week wait, and we'd had these embryos put back, and I was probably being really dull and really moody because you're in self-protection mode. And I remember the night before I tested, I had a dream that it worked, and I woke up and I tested and it hadn't. And it was just so cruel, and just like, we just need to get out of here. We just need to get out. And we travelled home. We had a terrible journey back up to the Midlands. Luckily, sounds strange, but my husband had to go to Singapore with work for 3 days. And for me, that enabled me just to sit in bed for 3 days and wallow. I just cried until I couldn't cry anymore, because I knew that we'd kind of had a cut off, like this, so many cycles, and that's it. We'd spent £20,000. You wouldn't go to a garage, buy a car, and then pay over your money and get nothing at the end of it. It's just the weirdest thing.
And it's
people call it a roller coaster. It can feel a bit of a nightmare. And I did take some time off, and I was left with that question: now what? Now what do I do? Because I'd like planned my whole future. So I did eventually come out of the teaching, and I was able to refocus and, I guess, use my experience to help others. And that's where kind of the passion for what I do now has come from. But I remember that time being a really dark period from the end of August to Christmas. Those, 3 months were really, really tricky, completely depressed. I did a number of things to help myself. So as well as the counselling, which was really, really helpful through the clinic, I also had some emotional freedom technique, or EFT, alternative therapy, where you're using the acupressure points, and it basically helps shift some of that energy. Really just took the prickle off and lifted that fog. I literally took it a day at a time. Sometimes it was getting dressed by lunchtime. It was just getting through those small moments, and then starting to plan those non-fertility related things, getting back to the gym, doing circuit training with friends, still saying no to the things that would trigger me, but actually saying yes to the things that I was saying no to before.
Things like baby showers or friends' babies' birthdays. Did you say no to a few of those?
Yeah, I said no to the baby showers, and it's still for me a bit of a non-negotiable, because I don't feel like it's a place that I want to put myself into. I might be okay whilst I'm there, or I might end up in the toilet, in floods of tears, and it might take me a week to get over.
Yeah.
I think we just need to think what's right for us with these things.
Be a bit selfish sometimes.
Yeah, it's healthy selfishness. That's what I call it. Healthy selfishness.
Kelly, I've got a very good friend at the moment who she's been trying to have a baby with her husband for 3 years. She's just had an unsuccessful round of IVF. What is the best thing as a friend for you to do for that person, either in that moment or in the weeks or months that follow?
Everyone would need different things, but I think it's about being there, and just saying, I'm here for you, whatever you need. If it's a cup of tea, an ear, just to listen, and take your time. Don't try and give any advice, because everybody deals with this differently. Sometimes it's about going, this is really shit. And that is the only word you can use to describe it. It's just a really shit situation that you're in. And I'm really sorry. And I'm here if you need absolutely anything. I'm here if you need me. And it's really shit. I didn't think I'd give that advice, but it is really shit.
But I think my last message to her is just a bastard, which is basically along the same lines, isn't it? There's not really much you can say.
No.
Thank you. Well, the final question that I've got for you is, would you do anything differently looking back now?
In terms of our journey, no. I'm grateful that we had the opportunity to try IVF. Because I know that with the funding issues, lots of people won't even get the opportunities. I don't have any regrets. I think for me, the biggest frustration was finding out, like I say, a few years ago, that I had endometriosis, and thinking, well, could that have changed my path? Would we have done things differently? And I'll never know. Probably being a bit kinder to myself, looking back to that person that I was 11 years ago, sat in bed after my last cycle, I feel really sad for the Kelly that was sat there, because I just lost who I was completely. Probably my advice to people who are going through this now, fertility treatment or, ending, is to try to still do the things that bring you joy. Those small things, those small moments, whether that's going out, watching the sunrise at 5 o'clock in the morning, just those small things that bring us joy, because we give up so much for the dream, don't we? We give up so much for the dream that we can sometimes lose who we are. So I think just trying to stay true to yourself, still try to have fun, with your partner, and plan non-fertility related things, even though you're hoping that, you'll be in a different situation if you are pregnant. Just plan those things anyway. Have things to look forward to.
Can you describe a life after not having children and what joy you're finding in your life?
Yes, life isn't how I imagined, but I've had so many opportunities that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do had I had children. I have a lot more time to spend with nieces and nephews and do all the really fun, cool stuff. We always have a choice about how we respond to things, Since ending treatment and making that really difficult decision, we've chosen to live, because I didn't feel like I was living in that decade, and I didn't want the next 10 years of our marriage just to be consumed by grief and depression and thinking about what could have been. So it's taken time, I'm not going to lie, it's been a decade of grief work and healing, but there's been so many unexpected positives from this journey that if you told me 10 years ago, you're going to be happy, I'd be like, shut up, no I'm not. No I'm not. But genuinely, life is good, life is happy, life is peaceful. I think it's about, finding your sparkle again after, or after a really tricky time. But please, for anybody going through this, support is the biggest thing. There's so many people going through this. So, please reach out and, connect, and hopefully, one way or another, you can find peace with whatever journey that you're on.
Thanks. Just listening to you today, it's clear that you have so much love to give, and the energy that you've put into loving and caring for and nurturing other people who have gone through a similar situation, that's as much of a legacy as having children would be. And I hope that you don't mind me saying that.
No, not at all. Thank you, Issy, and for sharing your story and your journey as well, because I know it's not easy wherever you are on this journey. So
it's a roller coaster. I'm hoping that mine doesn't turn into a nightmare, but if it does, I will know where to go. So Angela, I've got a few questions here which I think it would be good to answer, but also Kelly, if you've got any questions for Angela, now's your chance to ask them. The first question, Angela, is what helps and what doesn't when supporting a loved one through coming to the end of fertility treatment?
Okay. It's very individualised what people do want and don't want, but generally what helps is allowing that person space, so listening, but trying not to fix and offer solutions. You're so lucky you can sleep on a Saturday, or you could just go again, or, so not offering those platitudes, but actually listening and being there. There isn't a fix, but it is hearing for that person.
Thank you. And where can people find emotional support after their treatment if they're not offered it for any reason, or if they feel that they need something more than what they are offered through their clinic?
So as I said, a counsellor should be available through the clinic. If somebody is looking for counselling, British Infertility Counselling website has a Find a Counsellor section on there. So that's www.BICA.net. There's Dovecote, and then there's things like Jodie Day, and then patient charities like the Fertility Alliance as well.
Kelly, do you have any questions for Angela?
Angela, you've been doing this a number of years. And obviously nice guidelines and things are coming up for consultations soon. Do you have like a dream or a wish that you hope to help people.
I'd love to advocate for all clinics to have a counselling service in their clinic. I'm sure this isn't going to sound like enough for patients, but the gold standard for me would be for clinics to be offering patients 6 counselling sessions per treatment cycle as standard.
For me, chatting to people and supporting people for a number of years, that signposting is really important. Having those resources to other paths to parenthood or routes to parenthood early on would be really useful. It's really difficult when I've chatted to consultants and they are scientists and they want to kind of fix things. And when they don't, I've had consultants say to me, I feel like I've failed. They're not easy conversations to have, breaking bad news. I think it needs to be a holistic approach to supporting people as well, because there's the embryologists that break bad news, there's the nurses that are doing the blood tests and things. So that wraparound care for me is really important as well.
Yeah. And having everyone maybe feel a bit more comfortable talking about when the news isn't going to be the news that people expect.
Yeah, definitely.
I've got a final wrap-up question. Whatever stage of their journey they're at, what practical tips can you give people who have just found out that their round of IVF hasn't worked? Angela, do you want to go first?
I would say give yourself permission to pause. That self-compassion is so important. Remember that you haven't failed. The treatment hasn't worked. And obviously it's so much about people's core identity as well, but that real self-compassion, time to pause, no decisions need to be made immediately. And remembering there's nothing different you could have done to have changed that outcome.
Yeah. Thank you. And Kelly?
Giving yourself time. Some people will be ready to get on with the next cycle straight away if that's their plan. Other people will just need time to process that. If it doesn't work, it feels like it's an awful lot for nothing. You've done so much. And it is a grief because we imagined that embryo was going to be our baby. So it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel jealous that it's worked for somebody else. And I remember always being the person that it didn't work for. And that was really hard, So allow yourself to grieve. Treat yourself to something special. Whatever feels right for you, you might just want some time just to step back and to process that, because it's a lot to go through physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually. So that time and allowing yourself to grieve, I think, is really important before you make a decision or to go again.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for taking the time out, and hopefully we'll give an episode that your nieces and nephews can be proud of.
Oh, thank you so much. You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for doing this, because it's so refreshing. And, if you do ever want a chat, I'm here. If you need anything,
so generous,
I'm here.
And I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for today. You're been welcome. Great. That's it for today's episode of Too Much Information. A huge thank you for listening, and an even bigger one to today's guests for sharing their time and their expertise. You can find all our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Wherever you're listening, just make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss a conversation. If you've got an idea for a topic, or you'd like to be on the show, either telling your story or as an expert, I would love to hear from you. The links and useful resources from today's guests are in the show notes below, along with our social media handles and contact details. We are on Instagram at Too Much Info Podcast, where you can submit your questions and get sneak peeks of upcoming episodes. Finally, if you know someone who might find this episode helpful, please share it with them, because that's how we get too much information to the people who need it most. Thanks again for listening. I will see you next time.